And now I have the pleasure to invite our panelists, Robert Ashcroft, the Chief Executive of PRS for Music, that's the UK Collecting Society. Robert, can I invite you to the stage? Marek Kościkiewicz, artist, producer, co-founder of the Mono Music Group and the founder of GESAC Records and Machina magazine. Welcome. Please give them a warm applause. Anders Lassen, CEO of the Danish Collecting Society CODA and president of GESAC, that's the European grouping of collective management societies. Jarosław Lipszyc, president of the Modern Poland Foundation, and also an artist, journalist, civil society activist. Rafał Masny, co-founder of the most popular YouTube channel, also co-founder of Abstra media company and an active participant of Polish internet, video and marketing community. Marcin Olender, public policy manager at Google Poland. And Jane Secker, senior lecturer in educational development at City, University of London. Jane is copyright education and digital literacy expert. Welcome, everyone. I must say that I'm quite excited to moderate this panel. I feel, well, generally I feel quite tense, but I'm a bit relieved because I've been dealing with copyright policy for a couple of years already, and the questions that I want to ask you today are the questions that I struggled for a couple of years. So I'm relieved that I don't have to struggle with them alone anymore, and that you will be forced to answer them in a way. But before we move to the questions, I wanted to make a short warm-up game. And I was trying to find something interesting, and there is a game we in Poland we play during weddings. It involves a chicken, egg, and dancing, but we won't play it now. There is another game I picked. It's also played on some weddings. And okay, to cut the long story short, you have pieces of paper in front of you. Each you should have one card for each and some markers. And my request is to think that everyone think and write down three, and please write legibly, 3 features that make an artist. And that's also a question for everyone here. Please take a while to think what's in your opinion, what makes an artist? Trzy cechy decydujące o tym, że ktoś jest artystą. Ready? Okay, don't show it yet. We'll show it all at once. Okay, I think Marcin is almost done. Rafał, you need some more time? Yeah, well. Well, don't treat it so seriously. But to tell you the truth, I was thinking what would be my answer. It's not that easy to come up with free traits. Okay, ready? So please show it to the audience. And all right, so we have talent, taste, and beauty. Anyone got a similar answer? Imagination, freedom, integrity. Anyone? Show hands. Well, I thought about talent. And freedom was, yes, I think it also popped in my mind. Okay.
Questioning everything, crossing boundaries, questioning current state, and rethinking things.
Rethinking. Everyone is an artist, creator, author. Okay, you just can't answer the question simply. Okay. Okay. Who thinks that everyone is an artist? You have some hands. Courage, originality, independence. Anyone had similar thoughts? Some people there, yeah. Belief, yeah. Creativity and talent. You mean belief like commitment, something like that? Please take a mic.
Believe in success, believe in own art.
Okay. And then we have insight, expression, and connection. Quick show of hands. Anyone? Similar ideas? Okay. Well, it's quite hard to conclude. I mean, I think that we have so many diverse points of view. Who won? Well, there is no prize, unfortunately. I was thinking about making the contest, but well, I mean, there are no winners and losers here, right? Well, it's a piece of art already, I think. Okay, so now for the big questions. Just give me a moment. So you have the mics in front of you. I would like to start with Rafał. So you are, to my mind, a very successful person who can really use the internet to your own needs. Do you feel that you can use the internet to the full potential of the internet? I would like to particularly ask if you are if the platforms, internet platforms, do they help you in your work? And if you could change anything in how platforms work, what would that be?
Okay, so answering the first question, yes. I like the internet for real created a place for me to work, and I'm a YouTuber, I'm a creator. Right now we run a video production company, we have 80 people on board, and I cannot imagine like achieving a fraction of it without sites like YouTube, because for me I feel that internet gave the media back to the people. It gave everyone a chance to try their best and become who they really want, because it doesn't matter if you want to become a musician, an actor, a comedy guy, a traveler. Right now you can do it with the internet, with no middleman. I feel that it's like the power of the internet. It's the most valuable thing is its openness, the lack of filters, and like we will talk today about the filters, and I think like applying one and even trying to do it is trying to make internet, try to make media the same thing as they were in 20th century. And I think it's like losing the development and losing the progress that we achieved.
Okay, so you now I know what you don't want to introduce, but is there anything that you would like to change if you could?
Maybe we can think of a way to get rid of some hate speech, but I think it's really hard. Like limiting internet in any way will be tempting for politicians, for the media lobby to throw on their own agenda. So I think that right now we can just, leave internet alone. It will be happy.
Okay, we'll have a
I'm not I'm not this I'm not the person that wants to invoke really change right now, for real. I feel happy with the internet I'm working in right now, and I don't really need a change.
Okay, so is this really the case that we are all happy? Marek, can I turn to you now? I would like to ask you still the questions about internet platforms. Would you consider all platforms good, adequate? Is there a difference between good or bad platform? And another question, what would be your idea to balance the needs of everyone involved, in particular artists and users at the same time?
I think that the platform should be transparent. First of all, I think that we have two different kind of platforms. One of them is like a streaming platforms. Other one just provide the content from the users, and so we have Spotify, Deezer on one side, and on the other side we have YouTube and Google platform. And they work really different. One of them has 600 million users, and try not to be really fair to creators. Little better situations with streaming platforms, which pay some money for the creators, for the authors, for people who upload the platform. So I think that changes which we would like to make are not they not make any wrong for the users. We just like to ask the big players from the Silicon Valley to change a little bit the politics, his politics with to make creators more interesting to upload this platform.
So you said you would like to have more fairness, transparency, and some clarity when it comes to finances.
Yes, because 14 years ago when YouTube started to work, and then 1 year later YouTube, it's only 14 years. And when they started, they just allow to exchange our opinion between users. Now they collect the money from the advertising. So from the example from the YouTube advertising, which you can see on the YouTube, only 1.3% goes to the artist. So it's really small amount.
Yeah. Okay. So as I understand, your main concern today is money. With
yeah, I think that is that idea and the mechanism or how it works. It works very professional and really they are involve big money to make this platform easy to use and very effective. But they use the content which is uploaded by companies, artists, and so this platform can generate the money from content which is made by us.
Okay, I hope we'll have some time to just to. I think we will have time to. I will try to make some time to get back to this discussion. Before you talk again, please give voice to other panelists as well. The tool that we traditionally have to regulate all those issues is copyright law. And from my own experience particularly, we have a big task which is in the area of copyright education, because copyright law is often mythologized and we often have some misconception about how it works, how it should work. So my next question goes to Jane. From your perspective, what do you think is the most important thing that we should all learn about copyright law, and especially in the current situation where much of our freedom is actually determined not by law but by technology, because the code, as Larry Lessig wrote, determines what we can actually do in the internet?
Okay, thanks, Chris. I mean, we can learn a lot, I think, from the work of Lawrence Lessig, where he talks about Creative Commons. For me, as a copyright educator for more than 15 years, it wasn't really till I started talking to people about Creative Commons and giving more positive messages about what they were able to do, showing them content that they could use, that they became quite engaged with copyright as a concept. So Creative Commons, for me as a copyright educator, has been a kind of gateway to getting people interested in the idea that that means there is some content I can't use. It's not a free-for-all on the internet. I can show you open educational resources that you can use, and that proves to be a really good way, I think, of talking about what people do want to use, what they want to share, when they might want to monetize their content as well. I think copyright education is a very difficult thing when the message is quite negative and a sort of anti-piracy. This is wrong, you shouldn't do this. And for somebody, I work in educational technologies and teach staff about using technology appropriately. They will often say, well, technology lets me do this. I can take this content really easily. What's to stop me? Why shouldn't I do this? And so to kind of take that back a step and start talking to them about their own creative works, about how they want to share those works, it has been really, really helpful, I think. Because I think if we just focus on copyright as something being very restrictive and we think about it from a rights holder perspective, then many copyright users feel quite disillusioned and they'll just continue to sort of hide what they're doing from you. So I would have a lot of suspicion when I would say to staff, I want to run a copyright training session. They don't want to come. They don't want to hear the message. It's better not to know. I'll just kind of stick my head in the sand, and then I can get away with, I can carry on doing what I'm doing because I can claim I don't know it's wrong. If I go in and say, let's talk about finding some content, educational licenses, how those work, let's talk about what you can do under copyright exceptions, that frames it in a much more positive way. And I think is certainly much more, we were playing our copyright card game, the workshop this morning, and the idea that you can play a game about copyright led to more people coming to the copyright training that I run and that Chris Morrison, my colleague, run in 1 or 2 years than had ever come before. So, copyright doesn't tend to be the session that, you put it on the bill and everyone's saying, yes, I've got to sign up myself up to that. But I think if you make it about, protecting your rights, understanding what you can do with your content, finding materials you can use, that frames it in quite a different way, I think. And, you know, it also avoids making people feel guilty about things where they're quite concerned that they're not 100% sure they understand the law. They know that technically they can do something, so they will worry that if they admit that they might be doing something, that I might, you know, come in as some sort of copyright police officer to, you know,
So people prefer to
reprimand
learn
them.
something practical than to be told that they are actually criminals, right?
Yeah, it doesn't go down very well, does it, really?
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, Marcin, I think everyone is looking at you here as the representative of a company that tends to, shape the internet in a way. So I think we are all curious to hear what's your vision of the internet of the future, and it's I'm particularly interested if you think if it is possible to have a truly peer-to-peer net.
Yeah, thank you, Krzysztof. I would dispute the first statement, though. At least this is not what we're trying to do, and this is not the way we see ourselves. We try to take the shape of the internet. I think this is more the Google philosophy. But to your question, I think it kind of relates to what has already been said previously to a few of these questions, especially when Rafał said about the, what is the defining quality of the internet? I think at least at its inception, and this is embedded in the lore of the internet, is freedom. Internet allowed a lot of people to do things they were not allowed or couldn't technically do before. Some of these actually run afoul of copyright law, but that's a different issue, right? Internet is it's a protocol, right? It enables people to do all sorts of things. So I think preserving this quality is something that we should really strive to do, because it allows for creativity, it allows for economic growth, it allows for debate, et cetera, et cetera. So to your question, I think there's space for both. I mean, because the question is whether it should be a more centralized system, right, with strong nodes, so to speak, which control the flow of information, or should it be completely decentralized, as in a peer-to-peer network? I think there's space for both models, and this is the beauty of the internet. They are not mutually exclusive. You can have strong platforms that deliver a kind of experience, perhaps more curated experience, perhaps I don't know, in some respects, hate speech was mentioned, perhaps to some extent sanitized, also delivering something on top of the content. There's a lot of value added from platforms. Of course, I couldn't say otherwise, representing a platform, but we really do believe that there is value to what a platform offers. That's probably why they are so popular, and also on both sides, both for the people using them, as in the example of YouTube, this is creators or artists. We have different platforms. We have Google Play, which is a platform for programmers, for developers to disseminate the fruits of their labor as well. So it offers a lot of things, distribution, marketing, etc. So they're useful, but they shouldn't supplant or remove any other sort of activity on the internet. I think peer-to-peer networks, especially if the platforms, for example, become too, how should I put it, they kind of limit the flow of information on the networks too much. I think peer-to-peer will naturally, if the internet remains a free and open space for innovation, for experimentation, they will quickly gain prominence again, because it will be just naturally driven by people's demands. So I think it's not an either or. It's a space. There's a space for all sorts of models, and hopefully there will remain a space for all sorts of models on the internet. And one should not be kind of put above as the other. If I have the mic, I would just like to quickly point to something that was just factually incorrect. We can disagree on on the interpretation of the facts, but we should not disseminate facts that are just not true. The actual rate that an artist, when he signs up to YouTube, is actually 55% of the revenue, not 1.3%. That is the standard model. And for some of our most valued partners, which are represented on the panel today, actually, this rate may be negotiated individually. So just to set the facts straight. Thank you.
Okay, I understand that this detail is very important here. Okay, the way I see it, you talk quite much about that you are very happy to offer your services for everyone to use, and you also stress that there is place for every models to coexist in the internet. So, well, actually speaking about that, and my next question goes to Anders. Collecting societies are traditionally the vehicle to intermediate between users and artists. So, but if this internet is still that big game changer, what is the role of the collecting societies in the internet? And especially if we have internet with platforms, internet with automated transactions, self-enforcing contracts, all these trends that we hear about. And also another trend which I hear about in the collecting societies environment is the emergence of multinational licensing hubs. How you evaluate this trend?
Yeah, a lot of questions, a lot of big questions. I think I would like to start out by saying that before I joined the collecting society world, I was actually a journalist, and a journalist by education. Both my parents actually were journalists as well. So this idea about free speech and the value of free speech and the value of that being able to have that in a world is very, very close to my heart. And I think all this speak about freedom that we hear, I think no one agrees more to that than the members of the collecting societies, the artists, the journalists, the creators. But there is a difference, and there is a difference between freedom and free beer, as you all know, because we all want freedom, but we also want to get paid. So I think this is the issue that we're dealing with right now, that the copyright law is actually not an inhibitor for growth. It's a vehicle of growth. And it has been a vehicle of growth for many, many years. So copyright is by nature a really good thing for creating growth. The issue here is that we have created exceptions to copyright for good reasons. Back in time, back in the DMCA and the directives from the EU, we have created these exceptions that are currently being misused for another purpose that they were originally thought of. And that's actually created an imbalance, because right now companies can use content and not pay and not actually negotiating. The only thing we like to change, and you asked about the changes here, is for us to be able to negotiate, because otherwise pricing can't be correct. And you asked what is the role of a collecting society in a digital world? It's the same role that we have always had, that we, through our negotiations, are able to set the right price for rights. And remember, rights, there is not one atom in a copyright. In the right for a song, it's air. So we're selling something which is air, and there's not any atoms in that. So it's really difficult to set the correct price. So pricing has always been the key to collecting society, through negotiations, finding the right price for something which is intangible, like copyright. And I think that will not change. If it can change through your question to peer-to-peer networks, it will change for the worse, because it will be much more difficult for individual authors to negotiate the right price for it will only favor the big companies, the big corporations, and it will be a disadvantage to the small creators, because they will be left out in this game.
Okay, so for you it's important to have this bargaining power and the ability to raise your voice in negotiations.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And right now, we're not even being asked. There are a lot of services using content, and we're not even in the negotiations.
And you like, okay, well, now because I was just thinking of this asking is it always necessary to ask before you use?
Imagine you want to sell your bicycle, and someone comes up to you and say, I want to pay this price for your bicycle. And then you say, well, that's not really what I like to have. Well, take it or leave it. I mean, you don't have anything to say in setting the price of the things you want to sell. You would not accept that. You would not accept that in a million years. You want to have your say of what the price is. You might not agree with the buyer. Then then buyer and seller walks away. But in order for us to get any price, whether it's the bicycle or the copyright, then you have to be able to say no.
Okay. Well, my personal opinion is that we, talking about money, we lose some other important things in the discussion, and we tend to, bring the issue of, for example, of freedom only to some monetary exchanges. And so I have this idea when I designed this program of this panel that we could somehow touch some other issues than just money. And so one thing I thought in this in relation to this was to talk about other valuable things that we can have in the internet apart from money. And so this brings me actually to my question to Robert Ashcroft. And the question is about metadata. There is a lot of metadata which is, I think, very valuable for artists, and it's in the internet, the music usage data and so on. Would you agree that this metadata can be actually equally, or it might be even more valuable to artists than actual royalties? And another question, what do you think about opening access to metadata?
First of all, I can't take metadata down to the supermarket and buy my food for the week. So royalties have a sort of practical role in the life of an author. And I'd like to just draw this distinction between the author and the artist, because everybody assumes that the artist is the author, and that's not necessarily the case. So it is important that there be a mechanism for the actual author of a work to receive payment. And that is where copyright comes in. So if somebody is going to make a cover of my song, I have no control of that because somebody is singing it, somebody else is uploading it. That's the role of the collective, is to make sure that that is traced, valued, and paid. Now, metadata do have a value, and you begin to get into what is the promotional value of a platform such as YouTube. And nobody would deny that there is that promotional value. It's rather the same debate as happened in the United States in the 50s over radio. And radio, famously in the US, doesn't pay artists, but it does pay authors. And it understands that distinction. What it says is that radio has such a promotional value for the artist that it was deemed not necessary to pay any more, whereas radio always recognized that the actual author was unknown on stage, was not necessarily attributed, which takes us full circle back to your question about, is metadata important? Would you like to be able to search on Spotify or on YouTube or on Deezer or Apple Music for songs by a particular writer? At the moment, you can search by artist or by album or by playlist or whatever. And there's something that we need to do. I think it would be very valuable to make accurate information about who wrote the songs available. If you take somebody current now, Ed Sheeran performs a lot of his own stuff, but he also writes for others. Would you like to be able to get a playlist where you said, actually, I'd like to hear songs written by Ed Sheeran? And that would be something of great interest. So I think you're touching on a complex area where there's value in both, but in the end, you can't eat metadata.
Yes, I when I was thinking about how to organize this panel, I knew that we have limited time, and each of this question opens, very big topic. Yes, true. Okay, so I have last question to Jarek, and then I'd like to each of you to relate to what we've heard. So Jarek, please tell us in simple words if there is anything wrong with the internet and how to fix it.
So this is the 7th CopyCamp, and every year I was opening the CopyCamp. This year this honor was given to Krzysiek and Dorota. With words, we need to legalize non-commercial sharing, and it was something I was repeating year by year, because I still think this is like the only way to actually make the internet a sane place, because. Frankly, what you are proposing, and I'm saying like both my sides is pretty insane. I mean, so basically we got platforms which spy on me and you too, and they follow everything you do, and they record, they keep those records of everything you have ever read and seen and listened to. And they automatically create your profiles. They merge the data from different sources. They target you with ads. This is awful. I mean, and yes, we need a freedom on the internet, but the freedom is it means for me not being constantly spied upon, and so internet is a really nasty place now. It wasn't like that 10 years ago, even 20 years ago. It's not the place now, and the platforms, like all of them, make it really difficult to sign out. It's really difficult to use the internet, to communicate with the people, to share the passions, to participate in social life, to listen to the music and watch movies in a way which actually protects my privacy, which I deserve. And you guys, you guys, the only you have to say is yes, it's right. Just give us more money. I don't buy it. It's the problem is not about giving more money to this or those people, and even if those people really deserve it, that's not the core of the problem. The core of the problem is that we are losing the internet as a safe space to be in, because it's becoming dangerous. It's becoming dangerous because you cannot feel safe if everything you do is being recorded and monitored and kept in records forever. So, and it's difficult to participate in culture. It's difficult to participate in social life on the platforms. And the only way, unfortunately, to do this while protecting our own privacy is piracy. And this is why I think the piracy currently is an act of civil disobedience. And there is a difference between illegal and wrong. And piracy is illegal, but it's not wrong. It's just the law is wrong. And I believed that we can at least create a safe space, legal safe space for those who want to protect their privacy and participate in social life, in cultural life on the internet, by giving by creating a really small bubble that it's that non-commercial sharing is legalized, will allow people to create, to share, not to make, and to live like the commercial stuff, which will still make like 95% or more of the traffic and revenues and everything, and 100% of revenues, because non-commercial doesn't give anyone any revenues. Like by non-commercial, I mean non-commercial, like no money changing hands. And
Okay,
but I don't believe this is
we share
viable.
this vision to legalize non-commercial sharing, and sorry. Yeah. So, well, we share this vision to legalize non-commercial sharing, and we can talk about it for hours. And I think that what you've just said made all other panelists very eager to comment. So now I'd like to make a round of some additional statements, if you want. Let's start with Jane. Do you want to add anything or comment on what others said?
Well, I think what struck me was just thinking from an academic, a sort of researcher perspective of wanting to, further knowledge, to kind of make developments, to do groundbreaking research, and the need to be able to do that without sort of barriers being put in our way. And I think we do have to understand that the motivations of creators are not all the same. Many people who work in higher education are not motivated primarily by money. They want to share their research. They want to basically make the world a better place, if that doesn't make me sound like a complete idealist. And I think sometimes we should think about our cultural heritage as public goods and not as private goods that are there to be sold and always for making a profit.
Anders, I think you wanted to say something as well.
Yes, just again to clarify, I think if you, just to let you know, if you're a member of our collecting society, CODA, you can opt to take any work and make that under a Creative Commons license. So you decide, and this is the freedom. This is the freedom that we talk about. The freedom is not to have your work utilized by someone if you don't like it. And in other words, you also have the freedom to share it completely freely if you want to. That is true freedom. Freedom is not having other people using your material without asking. So I just want to underline that, and every one of our members can make that choice by themselves. That is individual freedom for me.
Jarek, I have to ask you to wait. There is not that much time after you just talked. Marek,
Yes. When you talk about ideal picture, I think that each of us has really different task and really different meaning what internet should be. And I think that it's a big ocean. There are different kind of the fish. One fish could eat other, and we have really there is so many platforms, so many levels in the internet, and each of the level has really different side. And I think that why we can't talk about the money, I don't understand. If the big companies could collect this money, could make it as a business. So why we can't talk about it? I don't understand it.
Rafał?
Okay, so I think that our discussion is like drifting away from the topic. That's my feeling. But what I really think about the change is that it is a change. Like the market is changing, the way we make money is changing, and it's very cool that the radio in the United States was mentioned, because I think that because of the fact that internet exists right now and the services like YouTube exist, artists just has to develop maybe not a new way, but kind of a different way, for example, to make money. And right now, I think that internet is not like giving away ways to make money, but giving a new one. Of course, there is a decrease in, for example, CD sales. Yeah, okay, but artists always makes just the pennies out of the CDs. Like the publishers get the majority of money. So right now, okay, we can get rid of the CDs. Of course not. Of course not. No. But for real, like the promotion value. Imagine, like for example, the number of artists that are represented by you are artists that are mainly played by the radio or with TV, because that's how they make money. So it's just a small fraction, like how many artists are out there and how many artists are played on the radio or on TV. On the internet, all artists can get their the public, and they can then play concerts and make money in any, sell merch. They can do like lots of stuff, but of course there will be decrease in making money out of CDs.
Okay, Rafał,
We have
let's
radio, we
give-
have
let's give
television,
some
we just have
space
new media
to-
outlets right
for
now.
our other panelists to reply. Robert,
course.
you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I've got a question, Rafał, for you. You've been very successful in creating your business, and presumably starting out in comedy, this is your own material and your own rights, and you've achieved an audience, and that's fantastic. And I agree that YouTube is a very, very powerful, free, easy access platform. As you develop your business, and you've got 80 employees and everything, you no doubt vary your content, do you ever use content that was created by somebody else?
Like, I think making a parody, making a commentary.
No,
Yeah.
parody, of course.
Yeah,
But I mean, do you have accompanying music or anything, or is it all just your own production?
I think that like we paid for the music. Like we use.
So how do you pay for music? You pay the composer, you pay the orchestra.
There are sites that are selling you music and just like this way. Like there are sites that are literally like selling you music for some amount of money, and that's how we used our music.
So you'd go to a company like Epidemic Sound,
For example,
buy
yeah.
rights. Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. What I'm saying is that there are people who write songs who don't have a salary. They're not researchers. They don't work for a university. They need to live. And if you were to use some of their music instead of music from a buyout library, then they would be deprived. So what we're trying to say is we're not trying to stop innovation. We're not trying to stop promotion. We're not trying to curtail freedom. We're trying to make it easy for people to know that when they upload to a platform, it's licensed, so they're exonerated from any responsibility. We're also trying to find a way for that person who writes a song or takes a photograph or makes a film to have their creativity rewarded. And everybody has different business models. So yours has been very successful the way that it is, and I infer from the comments that you get more than 55% of the revenue. Other people need their business models too, and that's all we're trying to do.
Yeah, so I think we all agree that we'd like everyone to be happy and coexist. And okay, Marcin, if you can wait a moment, because Jarek is very eager to speak. Yes.
I just want to relate. I mean, sometimes we forget what was the purpose of things, and we are fixed on tools rather. And so I think with copyright on a global level, we are at this point. I mean, copyright was created to get the artist some money, and to make creators actually being paid. And 100 years, 130, something like that, from the first international copyright law, we somehow forgot what was the purpose, and now we concentrate on tools. We are looking at those tools, and we are trying to make them work, and probably we are really, I mean, and those tools, they do not work, and you can see it. I mean, because copyright by itself is a monopoly, and what you say that you are an artist, and your freedom means that you are able to dictate everyone else what to do. And this is not how culture works. This is, I mean, because look, there is, if you want to watch the same movies as your friends and talk with your friends about those movies, you want to listen to the same music. And now I have Netflix, and my friend has some Netflix competitor, and because it's all about whatever, and because it's all monopoly, now we don't have anything in common to talk about, and you're trying to somehow make it work, and it's not going to work. It's never going to work, and people will look for ways to accomplish their goals, and the goal is to participate in social life, is to talk with their friends, we need new tools, and the more monopoly you put into the equation, the worse the situation will be. And
I suggest we, instead of using word monopoly, we could say.
But you make monopoly now. You make monopoly now.
Participate in culture.
Sorry.
I think that in order to listen to each other and hear each other, it would be better to say that we are very concerned about the need to, everyone's need to be able to participate in culture, which is, I think, equally as strong as the need to the other needs that were mentioned. Can I just ask before we make another round, maybe, to allow Marcin to speak?
Thanks. I just, there's so many different things that are being mentioned. A lot of them could lead to an entire new, maybe even a full day discussion. So just on a very high level, I see, we've got a very interesting, I really like Jarek's intervention, a kind of clash between the romantic and the practical. And, there is, of course, a lot of arguments, actually, I've put some down before, that about freedom, access to information, access to culture, participating in this community of exchange ideas, etc., etc. And this is extremely important. But on the other side, and I think this is what you were saying, someone needs to get paid to actually, and the internet itself as an infrastructure also. We can speak from our side. YouTube is an enormous technical undertaking. It's I don't even know how many zettabytes of data. There's whole warehouses of computers, hard disks. This takes gigawatts of power to run. It's a huge thing, and there needs to be some fuel in the system for it to function. So, and what we need to work on, and I think this is the takeaway that I would kind of focus on, that somehow we need to marry these two seemingly opposite things. So freedom, access, remuneration, and Jarek, just on a personal note, no one is spying on you. You know why? Because no one really cares about you as you. That's the difference. The system needs data. The system needs data to function. But no one is spying on you as an individual, so you can sleep easy. Don't worry. But just and there's easy tools, and I'm sure you actually know how to use all these tools like Coastry. But also, when you use them, please remember that when you block ads, for example, on YouTube, the artist doesn't get paid. It's something to think about when you make these decisions. They're not easy decisions, but you do need to think about the other side of the equation as well.
I would love to have a system in which our artists get paid, and I can do it in a way which is not dangerous or at least uncomfortable to me, and that would be a great world. And it's, I mean, with the monopoly, I mean, we get to the point that I think we need to start talking about ways of connecting the needs of the creators and the needs of the users, because most of the times those are the very same people. The difference is only in scale. I mean, everyone is a creator, makes photos, publishes those photos, and so on and so on. The problem is, like, some people get to the scale which make it commercially viable, and that's the only difference. And because I think the problem is intermediaries. It always have been historically. The intermediaries are the problem, and the gatekeepers. And but we cannot think about solving the problem of the gatekeepers with the thinking while being fixed on the tools we currently have. We need to design new tools. And frankly, I don't believe any kind of monopoly in the information age is a sensible tool with any future.
Okay, I have a technical question because we still have some time before the break, and I have a suggestion that we have some short reactions now, but would you be willing to accept some questions from the audience? Yeah? So just a quick reply from each of you, and then we will take 2 or 3 questions, okay? Anders?
Just to be clear, the right to have Netflix is not a basic human right. Just to be clear, just to let you know, on the other hand, the right to get remuneration of your creative work it's in the human rights in the United Nations. So just to make that clear, it's a distinction, but it's important.
I would like to just have a little support for our friend here who thinks that we're all against him. I too would love to have an internet that was safe and private, that I didn't feel that my data was being used, and I would be delighted to pay a subscription to have access to Google's search engine. And I would love to have the kind of results from my search that were not biased by the commercial interest of those people who have paid to get high up on the search list. And in the old days, when Google was first founded, there was some sort of algorithm that was more or less independent. And now what I find is I have to sort of scroll down a page or 2 to make sure that I can find the site that I'm actually looking for, as opposed to the sites that have paid to be up at the top of the list. So I'm not saying this is bad. I mean, Google's business model's evolving, YouTube's business model's evolving. We're working in partnership with them. I think the idea that YouTube is a licensed platform and people can upload to it without any concern about infringing is an extra freedom, and it makes the world easier. So I just think it's a little bit more complicated than that. I would love to see a subscription version of Google that did not spy, that did not give targeted ads, that just allowed me to get the search results that I wanted.
Okay. I like to say that collective society are not monopoly. They are just represent the artist. Yes, and do you think that Google is not the company which has monopoly?
Definition of monopoly in Polish law is more than 30% of the market. So Google obviously is in a monopolistic position, at least in the search engines business.
So how can you compare both sides?
Could I just quickly?
Sorry?
Could I just quickly? There is a monopoly and there's a dominant position. What you were talking about, Jarek, is a dominant position, which not necessarily means monopoly. And what Jarek means by monopoly in copyright is a legal monopoly. Like you can use the work to the exclusion of everybody else. But that's just a quick comment. This is not about search, so I don't know why we're talking about search. But just as you cannot pay to be higher in the search results. You can pay to be put on top as an ad. And that is an advertisement, and which is different to search results. Please, let's stick to, I'm sorry for this comment, but since you mentioned search.
It's a question of where the eye rests on the page to that person that doesn't draw the distinction. And trust me, I use Google quite a lot.
But that is, many people do. But this is a
almost a monopoly.
a fundamental question of integrity for the company. We do not allow the results to be skewed by any sort of influence. We do sell ads on top of search results. That's different.
Okay, so we seem to have a very important issue to define monopoly exactly and how Google works. That's probably also a part of education, that we should understand how different services work. Okay, last remark. And
I have a monopoly of the ownership of this phone. This is mine. Nobody may use it without my permission. I might represent the interests as PRS of 135,000 composers and publishers. That is not a monopoly. Actually, it's a tiny percentage of the world's creators. And that's the point you're making, isn't it?
Sure. Okay, now I have to make a correction. I don't consider myself an owner of my phone because, to my regret, that it doesn't run free software. So I think it's controlled by someone else. But I don't want to open this discussion. I see one question, two questions there. Okay, I think I have to go there to give you the mic, or yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I wanted to ask maybe a little less politically than we just had about the European reform of the copyright and analysis of Articles 11 and 13. Because a lot of analysts who reviewed the proposals criticize or focus on the fact that those articles are assuming that mostly the big companies control the platforms. For Article 11, it will be, if I'm right, Article 11, it will be the search platforms. For Article 13, it will be like media sharing platforms. And I have a question. Has anybody truly analyzed any alternatives which would allow smaller yet not completely non-profit platforms to take part of that? Because with Articles 11 and 13 passing in a form that they are being discussed now, this may end with like polarizing the market and supporting only the bigger players. So without talking about like Google, Facebook, or any big players by name, can we come up with any kind of law that would work on multiple levels with smaller companies as well, without only asking the bigger platforms to put a lot of money in a really costly filter?
I have to answer that question. Apart from being the chief executive of PRS for Music, I am the chairman of a small music neurobiology company. I have a license from PRS for Music. It's called the Limited Online Music License. It cost me £140 a year. My company's been going for 11 years now. I'm embarrassed to say that it's still pre-revenue. Our operating costs are £8,000 a month. We're producing groundbreaking technology. But we are conducting trials on medical applications for curated music. I need a license. So I think there is room to have easy access to low-level licenses that you can just buy online for a fixed price, which is what we do. So I don't think that this ignores the plight of small companies.
So just to clarify, because I completely understand this position and I support it. My question is, with Article 13 passing, all internet platforms that are showing some kind of ads would be required to install some kind of filter, and a filter which would be able to search for any copyrighted work would be a huge technical and logistic requirement that no small company could support. So while I understand the position as like acquiring small licenses, we are not talking of a license. We are talking of a legal requirement to possess a piece of technology that only the biggest companies can support. And I think that a lot of people are missing that this could change the market for everybody.
I'm afraid that is simply not correct. The fact of the matter is that as a small company, you can go out and buy a technology such as from Audible Magic or whatever that provides that content identification capability. There are companies that provide this, BMAT, Audible Magic, others, that at prices that are accessible for smaller companies. There are also the very big companies. I mean, Google has spent a huge amount in developing its content management system and other things such as the melody identification systems. Facebook spending millions and doing their own. There's a whole range of these things. But the fact of the matter is that in the license that I have to operate in my company, I'm not required to report individual uses of music. The terms of the license say that as long as I don't do more than a certain number of streams per annum, then PRS, and I put my other hat on, uses an analogy to pay that out because it's simply the most cost-effective way of doing it at this tiny, tiny end of the market. So please be assured, we are both practical and pragmatic in the way that we apply this law. It's really important, though, to have an overall framework that says creators have a right to be paid. But I do sympathize with your position because I have it myself.
Okay, the good news is that you can continue discussions during the break. I suggest short reply here and then the next question.
Yeah, just to speak from the GESAC point of view, the European grouping of collecting society, I just want to say that we completely empathize with the problematic issue of the filtering. We should not have filtering that in any way infers with the freedom of speech or anything on the internet. The reason filtering, what you would call filtering, came in was not invented. It's not invented here. It's not invented in our grouping. What we basically want is to give our ideal is we give a blanket license. So we get money, and the platforms get the right to play all the music in the world. That's what we need to find some way of measuring that and reporting that to us. And that's a completely different story. But we have worked very diligently also with the politicians in the parliament to come up with wordings of Article 13 that does not include filtering. And if you look at the newest wording and the wording that was voted through in the parliament on the 12th of September, there is no mention of filtering in that wording. And that's partly because of the work that we've put into that. Now, you may then say that, well, there might be implicit filtering in that. And that is true, and that is a problem. And I should sincerely hope that we will get to a solution that does not imply ex-ante filtering of content, because it is a real risk. We don't want that.
Can we have the next question, please?
I hope that for the future discussions during this event, we are able to acknowledge that this is not necessarily a debate about which gatekeeper is better or worse, the old dinosaurs from the content industry or the surveillance capitalists of Google. I think neither are a very good idea. Another bit is that I would like to see more acknowledgement that resemblance of content is not necessarily infringement. You can have all the content ID, all the audible magic, all the melody recognition, all you want. But if Sony takes down performances of Bach because they claim they sound too much like other performances of Bach owned by them, you're just introducing censorship. You're just squatting on our common cultural heritage. And you're just as much a bunch of thieves as any Pirate Bay ever was. So, and lastly, the classical definition of monopoly is the power to manipulate price. So yes, you as a copyright holder are a monopolist. Yes, Marcin, you work for a monopolist. You're just both monopolists. And let's talk about constructive ways of a future in which we are not damaging cultural exchange and nourishing new creation without harming freedom of expression, freedom of religion, and privacy at the same time.
Okay, so that's a strong statement about freedom and the public domain that should be protected. Anyone wants to reply? Jarek?
Yeah, just because in the meantime I checked, and so the Declaration of Human Rights actually says that everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. So actually watching movies which your community is watching is a human right.
That's a very far-reaching argument, I would say.
No, this is what participate means.
Are there any more questions, or yes?
I have just one question, because I think that there is something missing in this discussion. What's the value of culture for you? Because I think that when we are discussing copyright, we are talking about money. And what's the value of culture, in fact?
But you would like to have an exact figure, or why is that important for you? Mm.
That echoes a conversation that I had with Commissioner Navracsics when we were first arguing all of this back in January 2015. And one of the things, it came in the wake of a statement by President Obama at the time. And he was quite cross with Europe because we were somehow interfering with Google as a business model. And there was a lot of activity in the Competition Commission. And he got quite cross and he said, you know, our companies own the internet, which is the most unfortunate statement. I'm meeting with the various commissioners at the time. We were talking about the so-called three-legged stool of copyright reform and wanted to add a fourth leg about the balance of interest between the platforms and the creators. But I said, I characterized it as saying, actually, China and Korea and Japan have tended to own, if you like, the manufacture of the devices we all depend upon. America has a dominant position in the provision of the platforms and the internet giant companies. And Europe is not a museum for Chinese visitors to visit. Our creative industries across the piece are the very heart and soul of what Europe is about, both culturally and from a creative economy point of view. And in fact, the creative industries in Europe are growing at twice the rate of the economy as a whole. So there is a pure cultural value because Europe is this fantastic patchwork quilt of different people, you know, living in this common area. But it's also an important part of our economy. So we were sort of contrasting and saying, if you're going to have a competitive advantage, it's unlikely for Europe that it's going to be in the creation of internet platforms. It's unlikely that it's going to be in the manufacture of devices. And it is in our collective economic interest as well as pure cultural interest to have some sort of form of defense of the value of the cultural industries.
And if I could, I would just like to add one thing, and sorry I have to talk about money again, but one good thing about the collecting society is that they are collective. We are actually retaining 10% of the income and giving that away to encourage cultural activities. In Denmark alone, and sorry, Denmark is only 5 million people, so, but last year that amounted to 10 million euros that we gave back. That 10 million euros that are taken from the rights holders, also the big international rights holders. Sorry about that, Robert, but you don't like that. But that's the fact. We take money away from the big rights holders and give that to small startups and not companies, but cultural entrepreneurs. And we encourage cultural diversity. We feed that, and that money is really important for the development of more music in Denmark.
I have a suggestion, because at CopyCamp we usually reserve quite long time for coffee breaks, which I think facilitates more informal and less emotional exchange of ideas. So I suggest we take the last question from the audience and then we continue to the break, okay?
We had a lot of talk about money. I want to ask one more question. If licensing no longer makes economic sense, if it's like not reasonable considering the circumstances, should we protect stupid business models? Because it might simply be, not something you should do, and we still try to protect it.
Maybe you could give an example of such a situation?
We talked about authors writing music. Maybe they should ask money for writing the music instead of hoping to earn the money back through licensing.
But they do.
Very, very interesting. If you think about it, if you wrote a song, let's say Adele writes a song, and it turns out that that's one of the world's most popular songs, and it earns her, $10 million. Who is going to pay her $10 million to write the song? Nobody. Because that song has a life that it's her risk, it's her commercial risk, it turns out to be highly popular, it is played over and over again all around the world, and it generates that money. If, on the other hand, you write some music for a computer game, and with all the branches and the logic, and it's interactive with the choices you make as the game player, and the only possible life that music has is in that computer game, it never escapes, then you can make an argument that actually you should pay the composer a fee to write that music for the computer game. Then what happens with a song that appears in a movie, but actually it has a life outside the movie? And Bollywood is a fantastic example of that, because most Bollywood music originates in films and then has a life outside. Copyright is a spectrum, And it emerged as a concept that says when you write a song, you don't know its value to the first performer or to the first performance. So there is a sort of history and a logic to the copyright model. And there is also, and it's quite common in the United States, where rights are bought out and people are commissioned to produce musical works. All those models coexist. We heard earlier on about the Epidemic Sound Music Library, where they make music available, where they bought out all the rights. So it is quite a spectrum. So those different business models already exist.
I'm tempted to step out of my moderator's role, because as a copyright lawyer, I have a question in my mind, is to accommodate for this dilemma, how to evaluate a future value of which is unknown and unpredictable. Is the only tool to that end exclusive rights and filtering? Marcin.
I would challenge the premise of the question that licensing doesn't work. I think it still kind of does, but you are right. I'd have to agree with Robert that, and this actually chimes in what I said before. There is space for all sorts of business models, and I think this is what we should be concentrating. So licensing in the traditional sense, it works. We have licenses. Like I said, we disagree on perhaps the payments, but the general idea is not being questioned really by any of these sides. And we have a really interesting case on exactly this topic, and it was actually also in the directive, and the rebalancing of the license after a given piece of work has achieved unexpected success. We have a very famous now, it's all over the press, by the author of the Witcher books, which then went on to be hugely popular computer games. And after they made millions, the author is kind of now seeking, there is a provision in the Polish Copyright Act to this end, he's seeking to increase the remuneration he received in the first place to hand over the rights to make these. So these are absolutely valid questions. But I think that copyright is also, as you said, a complex, evolving set of all sorts of interests and all sorts of models. And I think it's not like licensing is dead and now we should have lump sum payments because they're in any way better than another model. It's just on a case-by-case basis, and obviously there is some risk to choosing, which Mr. Sapkowski obviously now feels that he took the wrong business decision many years back. But I think, and we never took an official stance, but this kind of rebalancing position from the points of looking from the artists is not a bad idea, a sort of ex post right to seek additional remuneration. This might be the kind of safety valve that could work. And I think it was Articles 14, 15 in the directive that were meant to introduce more transparency in the value chain, and also enable artists to seek further remuneration if a given work was highly successful. This problem, for example, doesn't exist on YouTube, because an artist comes, he uploads his work. If it's successful, he gains more. If it's not, he gains less. So we don't have this issue.
Okay, we have to wrap up, and my suggestion would be for all those of you who got a bit silent in this last part of the panel, do you want to conclude in any way? Jane?
Yeah, okay. Well, for anyone who doesn't think copyright is interesting, I think they should listen to the recording of this discussion we've had this lunchtime, because I always say to people, that's why I'm involved in it. I think it's a really, really fascinating field to work in, with obviously some quite different perspectives from the creative industries, from education, from the big tech companies. And I think it's really important that we also try to build bridges and talk to each other about the different models and what we'd like to see in the future.
Anyone else?
For real, I would like to continue this discussion during the coffee break. I think right now we have so many topics that were just touched, and then unwind that I will wait for the coffee break and continue discussion, because I have some questions from our friends on the right side. But starting it right now will be pointless, because we're heading to the end of the discussion. So like the conclusion is that the law that the European Union is proposing right now is wrong. I think we all agreed about it, and we should stop it. Thanks, everyone.
And I think coffee will help us to gather our thoughts.
So I think for the next CopyCamp we should make a copyright conference bingo, and with the fields like tech company representative says that they spy on you, but you're not really important, and like the representative of the content industry comparing music to bicycle. That's another like must-have. I mean, no copyright conference ever is free of that. So, but seriously speaking, we are slowly running out of options, and it's more and more difficult to actually manage the copyright in a current state of the technology and current state of the internet. The worst I can imagine is when you guys on my left and right, I don't know why there is so few women on this panel. Actually, take to get to the solutions together, because this is exactly the point where the general public will be. I'm trying not to use like bad words. Not in a not a very good position, because
please don't monopolize the mic.
No.
Okay, I like before the coffee break. I like to say that an artist don't make art for the money. Artists make money. Artists make art for the people, for the users, or for himself. And don't think about the money, believe me.
Okay, so actually I have no idea how to conclude. So I think I just want to thank you very much for this discussion. I enjoyed, this whole time. And let's continue during the break. Thank you.